Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Butler. I'm the business manager and currently doing the grant processing area also. Just to give you a little bit of background of my experience with grants, I have about 40 plus years of experience. So I spent 20 years at Stanford University, where I was actually one of the institutional sign-offs for all of the NIH foundations, NSF, and so forth. Before Stanford, I actually held a position at USC, and there I did the Patents and Copyright Administration and so forth, and actually held secret clearance there as I was the oversight on compliance and so forth for a secret project they had at USC at that time. So I have quite a bit. So you're in safe hands with everything that I help you with. So we'll start with the types of grants and funding that you can get here at on the agenda. Also, how to find funding, how to start steps and processes, basic budgeting questions, department grant incentive program, and at the end, any questions you may have. So sponsored funding basically is something that you're going to be required. Usually it's with a government organization. Sometimes it could be with outside industry and so forth. But basically, it's where you're going to have a statement of work. You're going to have detailed financial accountability that you have to report. You're going to have deliverables, and usually it's a specific amount of time. So depending on the agency you're working with. Versus a gift, which basically, many times, if you're working with the advancement office, you may have opportunities where they'll ask you to do a proposal for something that's specific to your discipline or your research interests. But generally, that's only for the sponsor to kind of get an idea of, is it a good fit? After that, it's generally a gift that comes in, and basically there's no reporting of financial on any kind of a formal basis. They may come back later and ask you a little bit about, what you spent the money on, and they want to know that it's actually going into the area you discussed. But those are totally unrestricted, and there's usually no timelines on that, and certainly no deliverables that are required. So. Then when you get into the types of sponsored funding, basically there's a lot of federal agencies, Department of Justice, NSF, NIH, NIST, just a whole slew of different opportunities. And on the non-federal side, you may get involved with some pharmaceutical companies, maybe Google, Facebook. Right now we have a Novartis in here, which is probably one of the first pharmaceuticals, certainly in our department, but even at CMU. And those can be very challenging to work with and so forth, and very timely. So, next, how to find funding. So, on the slides, and I will share these later, there are so many places that you could actually go in and set up a profile, and basically they will, whatever your interests are, they'll report back. So some of those, I know Hunt Library here has a big database of things that they track. Also, if you go into grants.gov, they also have a profile that you can set up, and they'll actually send you emails of when different notices come out and so forth. The National Institutes of Health being one of the biggest providers of funding in the U.S. right now for universities and so forth. They actually right now are at about $32 billion that they give out on an annual basis. So, and then with the NIH, actually, they offer a lot of different training for PIs and so forth. If you go on there, they have different things for where they'll even have blogs that you can get information, but also different videos and so forth for training. They have YouTube videos that you can go into to learn all about NIH and how the funding works. The other thing with NIH, I know a lot of our faculty here really focus a little bit more on the NSF side, but NIH actually has about 25 plus K grants that are for more junior faculty and so forth. And there's a lot of opportunities, and you can go in there and really kind of search those and look, because there's all types of exploratory or for student related and so forth. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be direct to a medical. I mean, they may be looking for information that, you know, where they need a statistician to do some analysis for them in different fields and areas. So always look at that. And we do have a couple of faculty here who do have a lot of NIH funding that would be a good resource, and that's Catherine and Rob. So they have a lot of experience there. They've also been on the review committees and so forth at NIH. And then in the NSF, again, they do have different programs and things that you can go into, and that's where a lot of our faculty generally go. The only difference with NIH is because they do have more funding, they're not always restricted like NSF is to only two months for a PI. So that's one thing to think about. As I said, we talked a little bit about the YouTube channel and the podcasts that NIH does, and a lot of that is even on grant writing and, you know, the fundamentals of applying and so forth that isn't offered in a lot of places. So getting back to NSF just briefly, they are, FastLane's going to be going away at the end of this year. NIH is already using grants.gov. There's also another, NSF is going to use grants.gov. The thing I like about grants.gov is I can actually add you when I go in there. I have a workspace and I can add a PI so they can go in and actually look at everything that I'm doing, which is really nice and helpful. They are getting much stricter right now, and they're going to do the DUO system. So it used to be people like me in the departments could go in and do a lot of the work for you, but a lot of the agencies are getting more restrictive, and they really want the PI because basically you are the ones that are accountable for that research, for the funding, how it's being used, and so forth. So it's getting a little bit trickier in the beginning process for the pre-award to help, but like I said, we're making it work. So another way to find funding is, you know, collaborate. There's a lot of people across the campus. We have Pitt next door that has a huge medical area. They're in the top 10 every year of NIH funding. A lot of times they're looking for statisticians to help them do work and so forth. But also networking, you know, when you go to JSM and so forth. Because I'll be honest, the larger grants, when you get into the center grants and the program projects, so these are your NIH, the P's, the U's, and the big NS center grants, basically they want to see a really significant collaboration, not only within a department or a university, but other universities and so forth. So if at some time you are planning on, you know, writing something and you're going to collaborate with a couple other universities or whatever, you know, let me know right away, because the process for setting up sub-awards is really very, it's long and it can be pretty tedious. More on the administrative, not for you folks, but it's just getting them working between the universities because they got to be set up as vendors. There's a lot of paperwork that's got to be done to make that collaboration work, but it does get done. So applying for grants, first steps. Basically, you know, you're going to identify an opportunity that you like. Make sure you read that solicitation, that it really fits what you want to do. Looking at the requirements and so forth. Basically, the most of your role is going to be writing that science. Mine will be looking at all those administrative parts. So if it is an RFA or an announcement or something, send it to me, because I have to look at that too to make sure that I've got all the pieces that are required in there, and basically knowing the timelines, if there's dollar limits, if there's cost sharing required, not required, and so forth. So there's a lot of pieces that we need to talk about. And then once we do decide that we're going to move forward, hopefully we have about a month to work on that, because it's a lot of things that I need to set up. So one of the things I will do is prepare the budget for you. I can draft the budget justification, and basically we'll talk about the list of things that I need first, because when I do this, the first step, I'll build a budget for you, but I also have to then put it into a university Spark system, they call it here, to make sure, one, it balances, that it meets all the compliance with the university, so I enter that budget there. And then on the third step, I have to go and put it into the sponsor budget, so 3 times it can be cumbersome. The other thing is, because they're a little short-staffed at the main university, and the time that it gets through, they need at least 5 working days to be able to review it and to make sure that it's compliant, and that before they'll push the buttons. And that, as I said, was one of the things I did at Stanford, I was that person, so I know how backlogged you can get, and there's a lot of details on the university side that they need to look at. So on our side in here, basically we'll look at who you're hiring, basically, are you gonna need more space? Is there cost sharing involved? And to be honest, we do very, very little cost sharing. Cost sharing can be very complex, and it can be even costly to a faculty member in some instances. So if you're cost sharing your time, because the department really doesn't have the funding to be able to do that. One of the ways we can offset that is if you really are hiring a couple of our students, we can kind of balance things, but it's real dollars that have to flow from different places. So, and discretionary funds are probably not something that you really want to use for those kinds of things, so. But if it comes up, we'll talk, yeah.
I'm sorry, what is cost sharing?
Cost sharing is when you say that you're going to donate 10% of your time, for instance, to a grant, but you're only going to charge the sponsor, NIH or NSF, 5% of that. That other 5% has to be formalized somewhere of where it's getting paid from. So whether it's a department, whether it's from your discretionary funds, because basically what you're doing is giving a sponsor an extra 5% of your time, but not charging them for it. And with that, if you look at 5% of your salary, across a year or a month or whatever, you've got 25.2% fringe benefits that's got to be added to that to cover your benefits. And then you get down, if the sponsor, right now our current indirect cost rate is 52.2, then you've got to add that. So by the time you add all of that up, it can really be pretty costly for whoever's going to cover that. So, and sometimes it is, something that you want to do, but it is rare. And I just want to kind of let you know ahead of time. If that's something you're thinking about, certainly talk to me so we can really kind of work through it and see why. So the next thing is, as we move forward then, is really, we've already got things in place. We'll talk about how much effort you're going to do, basically, who you're going to be hiring, and so forth for this grant. Whether you're going to use grad students, postdocs, it may be you're collaborating with another faculty member in the department, whether you're going to have subcontracts and all of those different things so that we can understand where we're going. So when we look at your effort, basically, Kira actually did a few of these slides, so I am piggybacking on that a little. Usually when we're dealing with NSF, basically what we're looking at summer funding down here for June, July, and August, that you're really looking at doing something outside of the academic year. But as I said, NSF only allows the 2 months. But if you get into some of the other grants and areas, they do allow a little bit more because usually there's a little bit more money. And I will say from just over the last 10 years with working with NSF, they've really tightened up on what they're allocating and so forth. It used to be, even when I was at Stanford, they'd cut maybe your budget, if you're going in at $200K, they may cut it like 25%. I'm seeing a lot of them that are coming in now cut at least 50%, sometimes right in half. So when you're doing that, basically you really have to kind of look at your goals and your specific aims for the project and so forth. Basically, if you're going in 200,000, basically your number A, basically, full-fledged, you're going in. These are all the goals you're doing. But if you really have to cut back, you need to think about B and C, that if you get cut to 75% or you get cut down to 50%, what are you going to give away? Because you do have to justify exactly what you're going to cut out of that budget to go back down to 100,000. And it may be that you're doing a lot more of the work yourself, or you're only gonna get a student, instead of having them through the academic year now, they're only gonna be a couple summer months, you know. So there's a lot of things to think about when you are putting your specific aims together of, okay, you know, this is what I'd truly like to do if I get all this funding, but think about, because more than likely, you're going to get cut back. I haven't seen any in the last 10 years come in full, I'll be honest with you, so, just one thing to think ahead. The other thing when you're doing budgeting too, as I said, you know, you've got your personnel, whether you're doing postdocs, grad students, with the grad students, tuition comes into play and so forth, because you really should be doing your effort with, you know, the cost of that entire grad student. And then you have your benefits. One of the things I really push folks to do is put in for a laptop, and especially if you're gonna have a student who may not have one, or you know you may need one that's more powerful, whatever, to do your data, or you wanna lend it to that student and that's what you guys are gonna use to collect all that data and so forth. If you don't put it in the initial budget, and it's not there, you're not gonna get anyone. It's very hard to get it approved later. So put it in. If you don't need it later, that's fine. You can rebudget the money and use it somewhere else, but it's better to put it up front. Same with, Alex?
I'll just add, as computing committee representative here, if you think like, oh, I might need a bunch of GPUs to do deep learning or access to 1,000 servers to run something, put in, well, talk to Carl to see what options you have with what we have, but if we don't have a computing option for free for you, budget that money in at the beginning as well.
Yeah. And that's the same with publication costs, travel. If you think you might be doing something with foreign travel down the line in 2-3 years or something, put a line in, even if it's a small amount, because again, it's harder to add that in later for foreign travel. So break it out, do your domestic and do your 2 different travel lines, so that'll help you too. So, as I said, our indirect cost rate actually, right now is 55.2, our fringe benefit 25.8. With grad students, there's no fringe benefits, but with postdocs there is. So, and like I said, when I'm working with you on these budgets, we'll look at all different alternatives and try to find where we can do the best bang for the dollar, so to help you. So, and even on the rebudgeting that happens later on. Facilities and administration, it used to be called IDC many years ago, and then it went to F&A and so forth. And basically what that is what the university gets from these grants for just the overall infrastructure, whether it's computing, whether it's central staff, their grants administrators, you know, finance, HR, all of those offices are involved when we're processing through, you know, hiring people and whatever we're doing, even with their wireless system and so forth. So every year the university actually has to do some cost accounting with that to really look at, and that's why a lot of things are done in different GL codes and so forth, so that they can actually separate out what is administration and what is truly a grant cost and so forth. So even our departmental staff, we don't have any departmental staff that are on grants, and the only way that you can get departmental staff on a grant is if it's really a huge center grant or a program project and so forth. Most of those fall into institutes and so forth. The other thing is, as you're collaborating, CMU is actually pretty good, a lot of the departments here. So if you are collaborating in another department and so forth, and you know an award's coming in, they have it set up now that I can see when you're collaborating somewhere for the most part, because we have to sign off on that. But what they'll do is they'll set up a string, an accounting string in our department, so that basically the credit comes in here and we can really see it and control it and so forth. A lot of times, so one of the things I did do at Stanford is with the institutes, I had worked there. And that's where there are really large grants coming in, and you've got a lot of faculty who are in there. the thing is you have to kind of break down the walls with that, and it's really hard to do because a lot of departments really, they live on the indirect costs because part of that does come into the department in operating budgets and so forth. So one of the challenges there is because your academic home is in a department, when you get into those bigger areas and do the collaborations and so forth, everybody wants to make sure they get part of those dollars and so forth, but for the most part, they actually do live in the institutes and those folks manage that, so. But it's a good thing because you do bring in more money overall to the university, so you have to think bigger than just the department sometimes in really collaborations, so. Again, what needs extra time is basically sub-awards. So right at the very beginning, if you're collaborating, when you send me your document of whether it's an RFA or an announcement and so forth, if you have any plans of working with another institution or company or something, let me know right away because, as I said, it's very timely. They almost have to do a mini proposal for me to get it into your proposal here, so. One of the things we do try to help as much as we can with the grant processing, but one area that we really can't do is your bio sketches. It's just really time consuming, and it's one thing that you really want to keep your CV and a bio sketch up to date because you'll need that for no matter what agency that you're going to. And a lot of them have their own special forms that they want you to do. NIH, NSF, did one not too long ago for DOD and so forth. Some of these are in different formats, so you want to make sure when you're formatting that it's easily something that you can copy and paste over and so forth. But it's too hard for staff, going back and forth in emails and so forth every time you have an update for somebody to do that. If you're typing it into the email, it's probably just as easy for you to just put it into the bio sketch and then it's ready for you to go. I do help with the other support and so forth, so I'll keep track of that. Even though I'll draft something for you there, I'll ask you again, to make sure, did I miss anything? Because sometimes you may be collaborating with someone somewhere else that I'm just not aware of, and you don't want to get dinged from any agency for not reporting something in there, so. So when we kind of get down to the next steps, let's see, where are we at? Sam, are you on the final? Yeah, okay. So, in here, again, just a quick review, basically, of where we are. We'll talk about the grant in the beginning. I'll create a budget with you here. I'll then enter it into the Spark system simultaneously. At that point, I need the budget justification, and your scope of work. And then what'll happen is, once I get it in there, it'll actually spill out a document that basically you have to sign, basically saying that you're gonna follow all of the compliance and things with not only the granting agency, but also here at CMU. And then basically I send that off, it goes through the dean's office, and during that time you can go ahead and keep writing your science and so forth. And once we get down to towards the end, like I said, within this 5-day period, I really need something that's really closer to your final document. And that's 5 working days, like I said, business days. And at that point, those folks, they'll review it over in the main university. There are institutional sign-offs, and basically they will push the button over there to get it submitted to the sponsor. So in the meantime, one other step I do is I actually enter everything into the sponsor thing, so they just review what I put in there then at that time. So. But they're always short-staffed, and I'll be honest, 5 days for them to review, because it's really a good safety to have them do that, because a lot of times there's new forms, there's new formatting, there may be an additional thing they're asking on, lately it was data they want to know about. There's also now the postdocs, they kind of want to have a mentoring, kind of how you're going to mentor these folks. So, and every agency is different, and it's really hard for even me or you to really go through, because a lot of them, in fact, I just did an NSF one, and there were a couple things in there that they didn't have it, that it was a required form, but the folks over in sponsored projects knew that it would get bounced back to them because it wasn't there, but it wasn't marked as, so it's a good safety, because once that thing is sent, and if it's after the deadline, so if you wait till that last day and your document is due at 5 p.m. at that sponsor, and basically they send it off from there and push the button at 1 o'clock, they may not get that ding back for us to fix it by 5 o'clock, and basically it just throws it out of the sponsor system, and they'll reject it. And the sad thing is it's usually administrative people. It's not going to be your program officer or someone you're working with. It's going to be someone that's just administrative and knows, well, it's not there, out you go, so you really want to be careful with that. We do have a grant incentive program we started a few years ago for faculty here, and these are for items that basically you help save the department during the academic year. It could be part of your salary, it could be picking up one of our grad students and so forth. And I know a lot of you collaborate and you're going to have joint appointments or courtesy appointments with other areas, but this would only work with grad students that are in statistics, that you would get this bonus. So if you go to the next page, basically, so if you pick up a grad student, for instance, 2 academic months, in the year, you'll get $250 into your discretionary account. And it kind of goes down, you can get up to $5,000. Basically, it's, whatever you're putting in, we have an algorithm that basically we look at, and those are paid out twice a year, so in late fall and in the spring. So it does give you a little bit more discretionary money. It helps the department, helps you, and it's a good program. So one of the things that's coming out lately, just in the past year, is that basically a lot of the agencies, and these are the government ones like NIH and NSF, are looking and asking for more information of what you folks are doing outside of your regular work and so forth. They want to know if you're doing consulting, if you're being paid, are you volunteering, are you getting any other honorariums, cash in kind things, and so forth. They haven't fully implemented this, but they are looking at it. And I think part of the reason, and again, my personal opinion, is really if they're giving out a lot of grant money, they really want to be sure that they're being equitable across a lot of faculty, because if you have a lot of other avenues that you're getting funds and so forth, they're going to possibly look at some of the faculty who don't have anything else. So but like I said, as this is implemented, we'll work together on some of these things, but keep in mind a lot of these are going to be probably required in the very near future. So when I was putting this together, like I said, I have a lot of experience. I can tell you a lot of stories, a lot of things that have happened and so forth. But if you have any questions, I could talk about it. I love working in this area. It's one of my favorite. I wouldn't have done it all these years if not. But if you have any other questions or things that I can answer, if I can help you in any way, like I said, if you see something that you're interested in, a lot of these, if you go over to Hunt Library, I know they also list a lot of foundations in there. You also may be approached, we've been working with Advancement a lot lately too. They bring in a lot of the gifts. And a lot of times you'll have different organizations who basically have some funding, and they really want somebody that's interested in autism or, neuro or some areas. Simon Foundation is one that does a lot of business here, and they're looking for some specific things. But you may have to do a proposal and apply for it. It may be what's called a limited submission, which means the university can only send maybe 2 or 3 proposals out from the whole university. But again, it comes in as if money and so forth. So with working with advancement, Rebecca's done a lot in working with those folks. We're going to probably have some of those folks coming out and sitting with you to talk about your research, what you're interested in, what you're looking at. But think about foundations or businesses or other companies that may really focus on things that you're really interested in. And I know sometimes it's uncomfortable going to ask for money yourself to someone, but these folks are really good at going and doing the ask for you. And it's really helpful because it may give you a little bit of bridge funding, a little bit of, gift money to do other things that you can't get the sponsored funding for, so. It's not a hard process to go through, with the grants. I don't know if you folks have, I know Alex has even done some odd ones like the Department of Justice and so forth. We have NIST, we have, a lot of, we've got Novartis in here, like I said. Pharmaceuticals in the stats department is, pretty interesting. I really was surprised we actually got it through, but with Joel and Kira did a lot of work on that with the negotiations, and we're looking right now at our next go-round with them for a continuation, so another couple of years, so. Department of Education's another one that has a lot of funding out there too, so. And a lot of these agencies actually have extra funding that you may be able to go and apply for a postdoc or a diversity student. NIH has a lot of those. We have one right now. And again, it gives extra money for you'll never get enough funding to cover everything you want to do on a grant. It's just, but you have to make do with what you get at the most you can, so. Any other questions?
I was wondering if it's preferable that we try to strike up collaborations at other institutions as opposed to collaborations within the university, or does it?
I wouldn't limit at all. But keep in mind, with Pitt next door, we have a lot of folks who are collaborating with them, even on a small basis, of sharing a student, so there's a lot of things you can do. Other departments too, we've got things with them now. We've got with, CNBC down there. So look at, whatever, you've got to look at who would really kind of complement what you're doing and add to it and so forth. And that's the way to kind of look at it. So go to JSM and some of those national meetings, like I said, find out what other folks are doing. Arun just brought one in. He's working with Florida and Penn. Edward's got a lot with Penn State. So there's a lot of faculty. Catherine's got a lot. Mount Sinai, different agencies. UCSF we've got. So it all depends on what you're doing. So, and what you're interested in, and who are some of your colleagues that may be able to help you really to bring in this research. So. One of the things you have to remember though, when you are working with an outside organization, CMU really looks at most of the funding being here. So it would be a small part that you're kind of parceling out for them to do. But that's not always true either. It may be that you've got a grant. We've got one now that I think has 4 or 5 collaborations with different universities and entities, even if it's West Point. But, when that one was sent out, it got cut coming back, so everybody has to kind of take a step back and kind of cutting back on the work and what you're going to do and so forth. But with that type of a grant, when you're collaborating with 5, 6 different entities, there's no way CMU is going to get the bulk of it. So what I have to do is a justification to let them know, well, this is why, because these people are all doing these pieces that are all coming together for the greater good of the grant, so. Alex?
So maybe I'll ask a question that I don't directly need the answer to, but I know has been a problem or a new thing that people have had to deal with. So if you're writing a grant with a postdoc involvement, someone that you're going to end up hiring, there's not just like the budgeting and postdoc management plan, but there's also new CMU rules on hiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like if you're trying to?
It actually is easier on the grant side for hiring. Right now there is a hiring freeze for staff and faculty at CMU, but it's not for replacement positions and it's not for things that are needed on a grant. So you would not be told that you can't hire a postdoc or whatever. So I will say one of the things that is hard sometimes here at CMU, and they haven't fixed in the last 6-7 years, is if it is a student or someone here that's formally, and there's been any kind of a little bridge, a gap where they've left for a month or two, it's really hard for them to tie it back into their old Andrew ID, so it does take a little extra time, but it's doable. I mean, it works out.
Wasn't there something in the past couple of years about needing to post listings for positions for like postdocs rather than if you have someone in mind when you're doing
Yeah.
a grant?
You do. And a lot of times what it is you've already had a student that's working with you, and we know that's who you want to hire. And again, this is just within this room and don't share, but basically when I write up that job description, I don't list a faculty member's name in, because if you're really well known, you're gonna get a lot of applicants for just anything that you post. You know, it doesn't matter, they may not even have related experience. But once you post that, you have to go through the whole hiring process, the recruitment, basically, and interviewing. So you don't want to end up interviewing 20 people that have absolutely nothing to do with what you're doing. And you'd be surprised it happens. So basically, when I write it, I'll make it very specific to what the tasks are, to that grant that you're working on, so that somebody's really got that experience already and so forth. And then basically, like I said, knock on wood, we've been very lucky. We haven't gotten more than a couple applicants, and you can weed through those really quickly, because you do need to look at those. If somebody does have that experience that comes in, you're gonna have to justify why you would. So say somebody at UCSF basically is doing very similar work and so forth, and they come and apply, but you really wanna hire your student, then you're gonna have to justify kind of what is that, you know, that difference, and why are they qualified more so. So, and it's just equity, you know, in hiring processes. So, and then I don't really post it anywhere or advertise it. We just kind of keep it on our site and the CMU site and so forth, and not really publish it out to a lot of the journals or places you may want if you know you need somebody outside of the university. So. And we can post it for just so many days, and then we take it down. So, good question, yeah. Anything else you guys can think of?
I have some questions that are maybe more specific to like what we were emailing about and the kind of joint
Yeah,
position,
no,
but,
that's fine if you want, yeah.
yeah, so I guess I don't know, for me, how to think about it, so I don't know, maybe we can just talk about it afterwards if you have time.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Just, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Anything else? Like I said, anytime, you know, ask me, stop by. I'm generally in the office because I've got to use some PTO right now. I'm in on Tuesdays and Fridays, but I can Zoom at any time from home if you have questions. And then, like I said, I wish we had someone that did a lot of the searching for us on grant opportunities. Right now we don't have the time, and that's why I think it's best for you folks to set up a profile on these different websites. And we'll send these slides out to everybody too, and post them on the web somewhere so that you can go to the links and so forth for more information, because like I said, there's so much information and so much to know, and every agency is different, every grant is different, and so we just have to kind of work through it, so. But it'll be fun, and if you get the money, you'll be so happy, so. All right, well, thank you. Thank you.